Now I know how the Percy Jackson fans felt. Hello my friends, my name is AJ and welcome back to my book nook and welcome back to another Pages to Stages video. Quite a while ago, I made a video on this channel reviewing the Chaos Walking trilogy by Patrick Ness. And I absolutely love that trilogy. It is such a unique concept, such an amazing execution. It covers a lot of personal themes, but also a lot of bigger, heavy themes through all three of the books. And I will highly recommend this book to basically anyone who wants to read a sci-fi series or even just the first book, because I know they'll get hooked and want to read the rest of them because it's so amazing and I love it. And I mentioned in that video that there was a Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley movie adaptation of the first book, The Knife of Never Letting Go, called Chaos Walking, that was coming out and that I would want to review when I had the chance to be able to see it. And I didn't have a chance to see it for 2 years, but I noticed that it was on Netflix and I thought, let me give it a shot and I'll give it a watch. I had a little bit of mixed feelings going into this film because on one hand, I love Chaos Walking and I was so excited to have an adaptation of it. But on the other, I know that the idea of noise and the idea of constantly hearing people's thoughts was going to be very difficult to execute well in a visual format like a film. And I was just really worried about how this was going to be portrayed without it being irritating or just being completely erased. And I have to say that having watched the film, those fears were valid. I watched it yesterday and I don't know if you can tell, but I am very annoyed. So today I'm going to break down what made me so upset in this film. There are also a few things that I enjoyed, so I will talk about those as well. But obviously there are going to be a lot of spoilers, both for the book series, not just The Knife of Never Letting Go, but also The Ask and the Answer and Monsters of Men, but also the film itself. So first let's talk a little bit about what Chaos Walking is about. Chaos Walking takes place on New World, which is a new planet that humanity has left Earth to go to. Todd is part of a group of settlers from Earth who was born on New World. And he lives in a town called Prentice Town, a town that is filled with only men and talking animals. The reason for this is that the spackle, the native species of this planet, were engaged in a war with the human colonists and released a biological weapon which caused all the women and some of the men to die and infected the rest of the men with a germ which made all of their thoughts constantly be able to heard and seen to everyone around them. However, at the beginning of the book, Todd comes across a girl who has crashed to Earth from a scout ship of a larger settler ship. And this launches him into a long journey where the two of them must work together to try and survive and warn her ship about what is happening, as well as warning other settlements about Prentice Town and what they plan to do. So let's talk about the stuff that bothered me a lot. The first one is the themes. Now, one of the things I've said about a lot of adaptations is that I do not care if you have to make changes for the adaptation of books to film. They're totally different mediums. The way you tell stories in them are going to have to be different. And if sometimes you have to cut things out to be a little bit more concise, I'm fine with that. However, the one thing I'm not fine with is if you completely change or remove the themes entirely. One of the things I always rave about with Chaos Walking is the amazing themes that each book confronts and the way that it breaks down these really heavy topics in a really interesting way. In the first book, in The Knife of Never Letting Go, the themes are things like the dangers of censorship and rewriting history and conformity, as well as what it means to be a man. For those of you who have read the book, you know that Prentice Town has a very dark secret, and you very quickly learn the truth of this as readers, but Todd has a hard time believing the truth because he's basically been brainwashed. He's been told multiple times through the course of the book by multiple different people, people who have escaped Prentice Town, people who are just aware of what happened in Prentice Town, the truth about what has happened in that town, and yet he doesn't believe it. And he still acts impulsively based on the past that he has been told to be true. For example, there is a moment where Todd and Viola are in the river and they come across the spackle. And Todd attacks him without being provoked because he's so angry and he's thinking, oh, he killed my mother. And he kills it even though he can see in its noise that it's afraid. And he's like, good, I want it to be afraid. And after he's killed this creature, Viola says, what are you doing? You know the truth. You know that he didn't kill your mother. And he has this moment of realization of, oh, shoot, I just killed this creature because I was acting based on the beliefs that I had been brainwashed into believing from childhood. And even though I know the truth now, I've done this. And he has this massive remorse and guilt over this action. And this is not present at all in the film. This moment where he fights the spackle is present, but the spackle attacks him first. And so the spackle attacking him means that the impact of that moment is no longer present. And yes, in the film, Prentisstown is lying about what had happened to the women and what had happened in the past, and Todd does learn the truth, but he learns the truth from hearing it once in his mother's journal, and immediately he turns on the mayor, despite the fact that throughout the rest of this film, he's been really, really engaged with wanting the mayor's approval, which is another thing that is changed from the book to the movie, but I don't really mind that much, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the section of stuff that I like, but right now I want to rant. Todd finds out that his whole life is a lie, that everything he knows is a lie, and in the book we see a lot of inner conflict there, of him being angry at Ben and Killian, his adoptive fathers, and just being angry at the world and not wanting to believe it, and we see that conflict that he has and how he has to try to accept this new truth. The other theme is the idea of what it means to be a man. In this book, Todd has a lot of focus on the fact that it is almost his birthday. His birthday is about a month away, and that's when he goes through the ceremony to become a man. But he doesn't know what that is. And what we find out in the book is that to become a man, what you have to do is you have to kill another man. And that is either someone who tried to escape Prentisstown, or if they don't have someone who tried to escape Prentisstown, it is someone that the mayor just doesn't particularly like. The problem is that Todd is not a killer. There are multiple times where the holy man Aaron is coming after them and he gets in a fight with Todd, and Todd has a chance to kill him, and he can't do it because Todd's not a killer. And Viola goes with Todd because she knows he's not a killer. The first person Viola comes across in the book is Aaron, who comes at her with hatred and yelling and preaching at her and violence. And Todd is the second person she meets, and she knows immediately that he's not the same. And even though she doesn't trust him immediately, the reason she's willing to go with him is because she knows he's not a killer. And the way that Prentisstown wins is that they get Todd to become a killer. And that's why they're chasing Todd and Viola. They don't care about Viola. They want Viola because they know that Todd will protect innocence, and that if they have Viola and they threaten to do something to her, that might get Todd angry enough that he will kill them. And Aaron, his whole maniacal plan chasing after the two of them is that he's the person that Todd is supposed to kill, and he wants Todd to hate him, and he does everything, including killing his dog, which is a heartbreaking moment in the book. And in the book, there's a big confrontation in this church behind a waterfall, and Todd almost kills Aaron. And then Viola kills him because she knows that Todd would be able to kill him, but she doesn't want him to fall to what they want him to be. In the film, so much of this is removed. There's no talk about becoming a man on his birthday. There's no talk about what that means to be a man. When Viola kills Aaron, it's just because he's attacked her. She doesn't do it for Todd. She doesn't do it, to prevent Todd from becoming a killer. And he's not even really hunting them down for Todd. None of them are. Instead of hunting down Todd so that they can turn him into a killer and get their army and go and conquer the world, they don't want Todd. They want Viola so that her ship won't come and steal their jobs, I guess. And like I said before, Viola goes with Todd in the book because she knows he's not a killer, but in the film, she just goes with him because he doesn't have a physical map. The map is in his head. She doesn't want to be going with him. She's going with him simply because she needs him. And that really to me, dampers their relationship. Basically, all of the important themes, all of the depth that is put into this amazing, amazing book is completely removed. And this movie becomes shallow and meaningless, and it's just a standard sci-fi. And it's so disappointing to me because this film could have been really, really interesting had they dove into those themes. Another big impact in the story is the idea of noise, which is what they call the ability to see everyone's thoughts and hear everyone's thoughts. And this is where I really think the importance of embracing your medium comes through. Because when you have something like a novel, you can cover this idea really, really well. You have these big pages where everyone's noise is shown and it's overlapping and it's all in different fonts and different sizes, and that really represents the chaos of being in town with all these men and all this noise. It's also really interesting because the book is written in the first person, which means we as readers constantly hear Todd's thoughts, and we forget about the fact that other people can also hear Todd's thoughts. So sometimes Todd will say something in his head like, oh, I'm not going to follow this old woman. I don't really think that she's doing the right thing for us. And then that person will react and be like, I thank you not to call me an old woman, actually. And you forget for a minute, oh yeah, people can hear this too, because you're so used to, as a reader, being the only one who can hear the character's thoughts, that it's really jarring. And it works so well to show this story. In the film, they took a little bit more of a visual approach, where it's sort of like misty flowing around their heads, and I don't really mind that. Definitely makes sense that you'd have to have that a little bit more, but the problem is that the noise is only really there when Todd is trying to hide something or when it's plot convenient. Most of the men in town don't have noise. The mayor doesn't have any. The only time that Todd's noise really comes out is when he's trying to hide and people need to be able to see and hear his noise. And it's really ridiculous, especially when people are talking to each other. There's no noise whatsoever, which I understand from like a movie standpoint. It doesn't really make sense to constantly have noise all the time when, you know, it's just sort of annoying. But even if they had done something like maybe echo what they're currently saying because they're thinking about what they're currently saying at the time, or something, just like constantly having background noise, because you know there are scenes in films that take place in crowds. It would make the most sense to me. But it's honestly so annoying to me, especially because it really diminishes Viola's introduction. In the book, Viola is introduced as a hole in the noise. Todd does not see her at first. He just knows there's no noise here, because even the animals have noise as well. In the book, there's constantly noise, which I'm so disappointed, because in the book, the sheep, they say sheep are so simple-minded that they only just say sheep, sheep, sheep all the time. And so there's a scene in the movie where they walk past some sheep, and I was so disappointed that you didn't just have the sheep all just going sheep, 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 sheep. Like, how amazing would that have been? Viola is this hole in the noise because she doesn't have anything. And imagine how amazing that scene could have been if you had sort of a panning through the swamp and it's all noisy and like sounds of like animal sounds and all that stuff, and then you get to this one section and it pauses and it's just silence. Imagine how impactful that moment could be. But instead we don't get that. Instead we get Todd seeing her running away, and it's so weird because he says, oh, they were hiding their noise. I don't know how they did that. Most of the people in town barely have noise unless like they're not speaking and it's plot convenient. It's honestly, it really diminishes the impact of noise, the impact of Viola not having noise, and just the story as a whole. Another issue I have is that we just see so much less of the world in the film. In the book, we get to see them travel through many, many different settlements, and we get to see how these different settlements handle women not having noise and men do having noise. We have places like Far Branch where there is women in positions of power. You have other settlements where women are forced to live in dormitories far away from the men and basically only used for procreation. It's just really interesting to see these different power dynamics and see how these different communities decided to handle the noise, how they chose to believe what the noise was and what it meant. We don't get to see any of that in the film. We get to see them leave Prentisstown, go to Far Branch, and then there's a big fight scene, and then that's pretty much it. That's the film. And it's not just the world itself, it's also the characters. We didn't get to see the mayor's true manipulativeness. We barely really got to see him much at all. In the books, I love him as a villain. I think he's so interesting and manipulative to the very last moment, even if you start to think maybe he's showing a little bit of remorse, he's not. It's all manipulation. It's incredible. I love that character because he's so evil and so interesting to read. We don't get to see anything of Todd's relationship to Ben and Killian, about the struggle that Ben and Killian had to face when they had to decide whether to stand up for what was right, protect the women, and die, leaving Todd a baby, defenseless, to be raised by the men of Prentisstown, or to become complicit in the murder of these women and be there to raise Todd and teach him what is right. We don't get to see anything of Hildy and her marriage and that healthy relationship with her husband that Todd has never seen, that sort of healthy relationship between a man and a woman before, and the balance of having noise and not having noise. We don't get to see Wilf. I love Wilf. I'm so sad we didn't get to see Wilf in the things. I just are just wonderful. His carefree, his kind nature, his sort of knowing that they're lying to him but not really caring because he just can tell that they're good people who need help. We don't get to see Todd's growing relationship with Manchi as he goes from finding him an annoying talking dog, that's right, Manchi could have talked, to growing to love him and really care about him and then lose him as soon as he's really connected. Or Todd's deep stubbornness that makes him not want to admit the truth about what he knows is being a lie, or the fact that he won't even admit to Viola that he can't read. We don't get to see Viola's cleverness on multiple occasions that saved them, or her grief over losing her parents in that crash and having to go immediately from losing her parents to being accosted by Aaron to having to be on the run for her life. We don't get to see any of that. We don't get to know what these characters' struggles are, what their motivations are. We don't get to see anything. In fact, I don't know anything about the versions of the characters from the film. The only reason I know anything about them is because of this book, and a lot of it is not even in the film, so I would barely even consider them the same characters. Okay, I've ranted for a bit. Let me give it a few compliments. One of the things that I did like, as I mentioned, was the sort of visual aspect of the noise, and the one that I liked the most was the mayor's noise and Aaron's noise. So the mayor, he has this mantra in the book and also in the film, I am the circle and the circle is me. And it's sort of this way that he uses to control his noise, and he uses it to turn it into a weapon. And in the film, everyone else's noise is sort of like flowy, like smoke and clouds, and his is just like a perfect balanced circle that just goes around his head, which I thought was a really good way to show that contrast. Aaron, also very interesting. His is literally on fire. It is sort of this hellfire. Like, I love seeing that. It was such an interesting contrast that really shows the personality. Another aspect of the mayor that I really liked is we got to see one little flashback of Todd being a child and the mayor giving him a gift of the knife and saying like, oh, you're gonna have to kill things, like, to survive. And it really shows the mayor kind of grooming him since childhood to become a killer one day. And we definitely saw some aspects of the second book, The Ask and the Answer, in the relationship that Todd had with the mayor, in that the mayor favors Todd over his own son. But I definitely thought that that was an interesting thing to show, of the mayor knowing that Todd is going to be difficult to turn into a killer and sort of working on that from his childhood. Another thing I really liked was Viola's wonder of the planet. There's a moment where she and Todd are in the rain and she sticks her hand out and like is letting it fall on her hand, and there's moments where she's like, wow, I've seen these structures in manuals before. And I really liked the wonder that she felt at being on the planet, because she was born on a ship and she's never experienced life on a planet before. I thought that was really interesting. I just wish we could have dove into that a little bit more. And the last thing that I want to say is I really like the impact of seeing Viola's ship crash through the atmosphere and the noise sort of coming up, and everyone seeing the men's noise in the ship immediately, and how much panic there was, and how I found that really cool. I found that really interesting. All right, so having said all that nice things, let me just say this. This film was never going to work. Even if they had kept the story faithful, even if they had kept the themes, even if they had kept the characters being interesting, this film still wouldn't have worked. And I'll tell you exactly why. The reason why is because of the idea of noise. Noise is something that is so hard to portray in a film without it being irritating. there's no way it could have been portrayed as well in the film as it is in the novel. There's no way they could show the impact as perfectly through the entire film without it becoming annoying when you constantly have to hear Tom Holland's voice as well as every other man in the film's voice constantly overlapping on each other, because the whole point is that it's irritating. The whole point is that it makes men go crazy because of how loud it is. And that's why I think that this book is just one of those books that should never be adapted. And there are a lot of things that I think are perfectly fit for the medium that they are written for. But regardless of how the noise is portrayed in this film, there's so many other issues with it that just can't be overlooked, even if you're looking at it independently from the novel. There's no deep themes in this film. It is just a, oh boy, sci-fi movie, oh no, people coming after us, oh, lies, oh, spaceships, oh, aliens. Like, this book is so amazing, and I don't want this video or this movie to put any of you off from reading it, because I love this book so very much, and I didn't really go into it expecting to fall as in love with it as I did, but Patrick Ness has created such an interesting world, has covered so many interesting topics in these books, and this movie, it genuinely makes me upset because it could have been so interesting, but it was so incredibly boring. You learn nothing about the characters, nothing about the world, and you come away feeling nothing because there's no questions that it makes you wonder about. There's no themes that it makes you wonder about. It's just upsetting. And when you strip away all of the interesting things from this book, when you strip away the character development and the world that's been created and the amazing heavy themes that it deals with, what you are left with is a sci-fi film that has absolutely nothing to say. But that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to stick around and get notified when my next video comes out, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to stick around. And let me know, have you read The Knife of Never Letting Go and the rest of the Chaos Walking trilogy, and have you enjoyed it? Did you watch the film? And if you have, did you feel that it was too unfaithful to the books, or maybe you did enjoy it as someone who hasn't read the books? Let me know. I'd love to have a conversation with all of you, and if you did enjoy it, I'd love for you to tell me why. That was a little more aggressive than I was intending it to be. But that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see all of you lovely people in the next video. Bye!